Hello, good people. Todd Shannon, data scientist, social commentator, getter of buckets. What are we talking about today? You know what? Hold on, I gotta turn myself up in the headphones here. This affirmative action stuff, it's like the never-ending story, right? It never goes away. And the talking points for those who are in support of it never cease to amaze me with how vacuous and lazy and completely incorrect they happen to be. So therefore, I'm back at it again. Today, we're going to examine a good debate that they had on a show called Breaking Points with the big homie, Delano Squires. Air horns for the big homie, Delano Squires, where they talk about the merits of affirmative action. And I'm going to need to break this up into a couple of segments, mainly because there's just too much nonsense here to decipher, okay? But I am going to do my best to elucidate the fallacies of the arguments for those who argue in support of affirmative action. So we're going to jump right into it. We are going to jump right into it. And let's see here. Let's see. Here is basically Delano making a solid case for why race-based preferences don't make any sense. Let's listen to the big homie.
In any sense, when you are subjecting different people to different standards of assessment based on skin color, ethnicity, or any other immutable characteristic. And that's what's actually happening at Harvard. So a few data points. Harvard has, the applicants ranked in deciles. Mm-hmm. So, first to 10th being the highest, number one being the lowest. A black student in the 4th decile has a higher chance of being admitted into Harvard than an Asian student in the 10th decile. Now, mind you, if you're in the 4th decile at Harvard, you're not some schlub. You'd probably be in the 8th decile at the University of Massachusetts. But that student is being given an artificial bump over a student who has a more competitive academic background because of this notion that this is going to, redress some of the issues that have gone on with race in our country's past. And I don't think that's sustainable. And I think the biggest reason why, and I think Michael knows this and would acknowledge this, is that racial preferences are unsustainable because it's something that its proponents demand but will never claim. Because we'll say, oh, we need racial preferences to keep the Ivy Leagues diverse. But then any particular black student who's there say, oh, you only got in because of racial preferences. It's like, oh, no, that's not true. I earned my way here. So those two things are irreconcilable. And none of us want to feel as if we're being tokenized.
All right. So you heard what the homie Delano Squires said. Shout out to Delano because that's exactly on point. There's a clear, I used to think affirmative action was like, well, all things being equal, if both candidates were basically the same and then you chose the black person because of diversity reasons or what have you, I was like, that's cool. I don't have any problem with that. But the problem is that that's not what's happening. They're not equal weights and measures. They're not using the same rubric to judge one group as they are to judge the other. And this is inherently unfair. There's no way around it. And so Delano, with actual data and talking points that are backed by real information, actually affirms this. Now, of course, we're going to get to this, the light-skinned fellow here. I just want to say, just as a side note, these people, particularly a lot of times these black people who effectively have been co-opted by white liberals, I'm just going to say it that way, they often make these talking points mainly because they've gone to these liberal schools, they've been indoctrinated, and they just kind of repeat ad nauseum things that are not actually backed. And so I want you to listen to this argument because it's so often asserted that, hey, these things benefit us as a matter of principle. And I did another video with Tom Sowell and Malcolm Gladwell effectively debunking a lot of the talking points. But listen to this gentleman, listen to the claim he makes about when Delano says that, and I won't watch Delano's part, but he said basically that most of these people who are actually benefiting from these affirmative action are not actually the poor people that are being targeted. And I'm going to demonstrate that with some other data that I'll show you later. But listen to the point that he makes here. So let's go back here.
is perceived as having benefited from affirmative action, then you're always going to be sort of taken down a notch, that you're always going to be viewed as lesser than because you are even perceived to have benefited from this policy.
Let me address the lesser than. Affirmative action isn't gonna cure that. Whether you're at Harvard or elsewhere, there's insidious bias in this country, and I think affirmative action is never gonna redress that.
Note just the blanket affirmation. There's insidious bias. How much? How does it impact us? They never really say, but they're just quite fond of just asserting that fact as just some universal asset that's always present and always impacting everyone the same way. It's frustrating. Let's let them listen and let's let them continue.
But what it can do, and I actually disagree with the idea that black people aren't going to Harvard from poor schools, because when you look at the numbers, most African Americans who are going to elite universities are first generation college students. And so I think the idea that somehow it's going to make African Americans feel like they didn't get there on their own or they didn't deserve to be there, I think that's, no offense, intellectually lazy, because
Hang on a second, man. Hang on a second.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Intellectually lazy. Let me just look in the camera here real quick. This guy making claims that Delano's being intellectually lazy when the nonsense that he just spewed. Listen to what he says. Delano's making the point. Hey, these programs are not even benefiting the people that you think they are, right? And then he goes, well, I don't agree with that because a lot of these people are first generation college students. Okay, so what do you mean? So first generation college student means poor? Did that mean that these people are necessarily poor? Let me tell you something. Let me tell you the only thing that needs to happen for people to avoid poverty in this nation. Do you know what it is? There are three things you need to do. One, finish high school. Two, don't have kids before you get married. And three, work a consistent full-time job. If you do those three things, it is almost impossible in this country to be permanently poor. And if you're married in that situation where both people in the house finish high school, that's the only requirement. Matter of fact, I got a friend of mine that actually works in, I won't say the city, but he works in a certain city where he's like a transit operator or something to that effect. It's a city job. It's more money than he could make it with most jobs he would have gotten with a degree. In the city, there are a lot of jobs you can do without a college degree. And by the way, there are also a lot of blue collar workers, electricians, plumbers, people who own their own businesses. They didn't necessarily go to college. So he's talking about Delano being intellectually lazy when he is equating first-year college student or first-generation college student with poor. Now that is intellectually lazy, and I grow so weary of these what I call these upper class Negroes, upper middle class Negroes. Almost always, these people are not people who actually came from the struggle that they are so fond of kind of romanticizing. They grew up in two-parent homes. They grew up actually doing pretty well in life. And then they get out and want to lecture everybody else about the black struggle when they don't know the first thing about it. They might as well be reading about the black struggle in a comic book because they've never experienced it. It's a fantasy as far as they're concerned. So I'm really annoyed by this. All right, let's continue. So the next talking point is he's going to make some silly point about how first base and third base. And so let's go here. So this is the classic case of, hey, well, black people are starting behind, so we got to give them a leg up. All right, let's go there really quick. Cue this up. All right.
Americans are starting on first base, and you're seeing at the end of the day, African Americans are starting on first base, and you're seeing a lot of white Americans just based on things like redlining, neighborhoods, funding, starting on second or third base.
And then what?
I should have gave you a little bit of context with that, but it's what it is. It's like, hey, white people start on third base and black people start on first base. Therefore, I don't have time to deal with this redlining. I'm going to do, the Lord willing, I'm going to do a whole series on redlining because there's something odd about the redlining claim. It's like the invincible star that you get in Mario. You get the star and then you become invincible. This redlining talking point is everybody who is all about race-based preferences and all about, United States is rife with implicit bias and racism, blah, 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 systemic racism. They thought the redlining card, it's like the star in Mario. It makes them invincible. There's something really weird about the whole assumption behind redlining, which is that the reason why these neighborhoods were poor and downtrodden is because lenders wouldn't finance or wouldn't make loans to these neighborhoods. So the question becomes this. If the people were the people that we are claiming that they are, right? We're saying, hey, these are people that are upstanding, these are hardworking, these are high value people, and these neighborhoods are worthy to be invested in, right? Okay, that's the claim. Well, then what would happen then if that was the case? If you just gave it some time for the people to demonstrate that, I cannot make the logical connection between, hey, Bank X didn't make loans in this neighborhood, and then now it became like a drug trap war zone. I don't understand that rationale, because I can tell you one thing. I lived in the projects. I grew up in the projects, and every single house that was there, some people had certain values, and some people had other values. In my house, we had certain values, and my mom taught us about God, and she taught us about a Christ-centered lifestyle and how that would impact us positively as our life went on. And you know what happened in our house? We did that. We lived by that rule. We lived by those principles. And as a result, what came out of it is my brother, who has a master's degree in education, I have a master's degree in data science, and my sister married a pastor. So my point is that the fact that no one came and gave us money or gave us an opportunity to be a homeowner, that didn't make anything. It didn't change our trajectory, because of the kind of people and the things that we believed, the kind of people that we were, eventually resulted in our flourishing. So it doesn't really make sense to me. If the people in those neighborhoods were the kinds of people we insist that they were, and understand what I'm saying. I'm not trying to cast aspersions on the people. The point that I'm making, though, is this. If the assumption of the banks were wrong, then what they would have seen 20 years later is a neighborhood that was clean, it was not crime-ridden, it was not a war zone, and then they would have said, we made a mistake. Is that what happened? No, it's not what happened. That's not what happened. Now, there again, I'm just giving an anecdotal, I'm just giving an anecdotal observation that I've made. And I know this, the redlining conversation is much more complex, right? But the point that I'm making more broadly is that redlining, the whole redlining talking point, it's not the Mario star. It's not the invincibility star. And it doesn't have the implications that we claim it has. Just like the same way we talk about racism all the time. It's like, oh, racism is just this blanket nebulous thing that is ever present and has an impact X on X. But nobody can quantify it. Nobody can point to specifically how it's impacting us. All right, let's keep it moving. Now, this is the final point that I want to make here, because there's an argument about the so-called elite society, and that if black people don't get into these elite societies, then they will never be able to flourish, right? So this is, part of the argument and rationale behind allowing blacks who may not have the same academic record as some of the other people in other racial profiles, nevertheless, it's still warranted that we let them in. And the counter argument to that is, yeah, you're doing that also actually to the detriment of the people who go there, because when they do go there, because they are not really qualified, because they don't have the academic background, they can't keep up. They end up flunking out. They end up switching majors to something simpler, right? So it doesn't actually help them net. Now listen to what this lady says.
you've seen a decline in diversity. So what do you say to the case that, listen, you might say the policy is not perfect, but at least it's something. At least it is allowing more Black folks to ascend to achieve that middle class dream, upper middle class dream, and make it into elite society in America?
So I think a couple of things. One, I think what you've seen in California is that there may be a decrease in number of students, let's say, going to Berkeley, but some of the students who may have been getting an artificial bump to go into Berkeley may be at UC Davis, right? So it's not that fewer students are going. I think it's just a better match between academic profile and institution.
But how better?
I just saw some research, though, that did show that, because I've heard this argument before, too, that it's actually better for them that they're not ending up at Berkeley because they're going to be better able to handle the workload at UC Davis, et cetera.
Right.
There is research, though, that shows that that's not really accurate, that they will still suffer, an income drop from not being in Berkeley and being in UC Davis or one of the other Fresno or whatever the other state schools are.
What? Bro,
Okay.
what are you talking about, man?
Let's bring you back to the camera here. Now, note Delano, because he's on his game. Once again, shout out to the homie Delano, because he's killing it. Note that Delano came with the facts, right? And he talked about this a little bit more, and I didn't have a chance to show it all, but it was actually, once again, the subject of my other video with Malcolm Gladwell and Thomas Sowell, which is that these things don't actually help the people. And she makes the case. Now listen to what she says very carefully. She says, well, I've heard that argument, but I don't think it's true because the people do end up suffering because they end up having lesser income. All right, listen to me very carefully. Is it possible, liberal white lady, and I hate to be mean like this, but is it possible that the reason why people who don't go to those schools end up making less money is because they are less capable, which is why they didn't get into the school in the first place? She's trying to make the case that if they would have gotten into the elite institution, they would have made more money. That is false, because what the studies show is that when they get into an institution that they are not matched with, they end up failing at a much higher clip. So what she's saying is that, hey, people who go to these institutions make more money. So therefore, I can show you how the people who don't get into the institutions make less money. Of course, people who go to Harvard make more money than people who don't go to Harvard. But the point is that because Harvard is so selective, these are more talented people, these are more capable people, and that's why they make more money. They don't make more money because they go to Harvard. They go to Harvard because they have the potential of making more money. This is not hard. The thinking of these people is so shallow and lazy. And that's why I'm annoyed when they try to make these like, oh, well, that's not true. That's intellectually lazy. All right. If you need more proof of this, of course, let's listen to the great Tom Sowell. He breaks this down. And the thing that I like about Thomas Sowell being, first of all, he's fact-based. But second of all, he often does these studies in areas where the political and racial aspects are much less contentious, so that the actual data can shine through. And what he shows, he does these same studies because America is not the only place with, certain preferences for certain quote unquote disadvantaged groups. So this video is called Revealing the Hidden Reality of Affirmative Action Worldwide. I encourage you to go and look at it. I'll actually put the link in the description here. But listen to what Tom Sowell uncovers here.
Can be seen by what happened when racial preferences were banned in the University of California system. Despite dire predictions that there would be a drastic reduction in the number of minority students in the University of California system after racial preferences in admission were banned, an empirical study showed that there were modest declines in Black and Hispanic enrollment, but an increase in Black and Hispanic degrees.
Think about that. The enrollment went down, but the obtaining of degrees went up. What could account for such a phenomenon? Let's see.
What a fascinating etymological discovery.
What a fascinating discovery. Could it be that when you admit people into schools for which they are not qualified to be admitted, that they not only flunk out, but they also skew the statistics about the relative success of the people? Then, if you cut the fat and you get rid of the people who shouldn't be there, the people go to the universities for which they're well qualified, so their obtaining of degrees goes up, but you have less enrollment overall? That seems like a reasonable explanation for this phenomenon. Let's continue.
There were major declines in minority enrollment at the top-ranked Berkeley and UCLA campuses, 42% and 33% respectively.
Right.
But these declines were almost completely offset by increases in the number of minority students at the other campuses. More important, there was an increase in the number of Black and Hispanic students graduating from the University of California system, including an increase of 55% in the number graduating in 4 years and an increase of 63% in the number graduating in 4 years with a grade point average of 3.5 or higher.
Let me run that back because I interrupted with the air horns. Talk to him, Tom Sowell.
Including an increase of 55% in the number graduating in 4 years and an increase of 63% in the number graduating in 4 years with a grade point average of 3.5 or higher.
What could account for that? Well, if you go to a school that isn't beyond your academic capacity, you have an opportunity to excel. Once again, I encourage you to go and watch my video where I talked about this with a talk that Malcolm Gladwell, I'll also put that link, Malcolm Gladwell did at Google, where he said that class rank is actually a better predictor of career success and academic success. Class rank, not the school you go to. And he actually advocated that you don't go to the top school that you get admitted into. But listen to this further, because this is fascinating.
The number of Black and Hispanic students who graduated with degrees in science, technology, mathematics, and engineering rose by 51%, and the number of doctorates earned by Black and Hispanic students in the system rose by 25% after preferential admissions policies were banned. Data from other colleges and universities.
Now, to be clear, many of you may not understand this. The latest banning of race-based preferences by the Supreme Court, that really was basically a national banning, right? They're saying it's unconstitutional. Institutions everywhere can no longer have race-based preferences in their admissions. But this had actually already been the case in California because, ironically, California has a very, very, very high Asian population. And so this had been disproportionately impacting people in the California university system way before it became a more national conversation because, the disproportionate number of Asians there. They brought suit to the UC Berkeley or the California university system. And so this has been outlawed in California for some time now. So that's why the data is available. And now it's just reaching institutions like Harvard and Princeton because they're on the East Coast and they're not part of the California university system. So I just thought that was important to point out.
Universities likewise show higher graduation rates for Black students at colleges and universities when their academic qualifications are more similar to those of the other students at those institutions. Moreover, Black students who are mismatched with law schools do not pass the bar examination as often as Black students with very similar academic qualifications who went to law schools where the other students had similar academic qualifications. The end result can be fewer Black lawyers than if there were no affirmative action. The negative effects of affirmative action on the non-preferred groups, such as whites and Asian Americans, have been obvious. But when there are also negative effects on groups preferentially admitted, it is by no means clear who is gained, other than the...
All right, so you hear that. So he actually started out talking about some of the same race-based preferences in India, so that's an interesting conversation. All right, so I've made my point. This is part one. There's much more to this debate that I'll come back and circle back to. But I just wanted to point those out. Shout to the big homie Delano, and shout to you who are listening to my material and my vlogs, my podcast. If you like this content, please like, share, please subscribe. Please make me a comment because, somehow the algorithms like that. And let's get this stuff trending. Let's get this conversation popping here because we need to have these conversations. Till next time, my friends, God bless you.